They say daytime talk shows are predictable, scripted laughs, recycled topics, and polite applause. But what happened on The View that morning was anything but predictable. If you've been waiting for a moment that breaks the boundaries of daytime television, you're in the right place. But before we peel back every layer of this explosive encounter, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Because this story builds fast, and what starts as a casual interview soon becomes a full-blown disaster. It was supposed to be a celebration. Harrison Ford, Hollywood icon, was making one of his rare talk show appearances to promote his latest film. The producers had marketed it for days. A legend returns. Don't miss this Thursday's episode. Fans tuned in expecting stories about Indiana Jones, dry wit, and maybe a grumpy joke or two, the kind Harrison had perfected over the years. What they got was something else entirely. From the moment he walked onto the set, something was off. The crowd still roared when he appeared, of course. That was automatic. But those who knew Ford could tell he wasn't in a good mood. He adjusted his blazer roughly, gave a polite wave, but didn't smile. Joy Behar, the show's most vocal and unfiltered co-host, greeted him with her signature enthusiasm. Harrison Ford, still the sexiest action hero in his 80s, she said, laughing. He offered a half chuckle, a tired nod. The conversation started out typical. Questions about the new film, reflections on Hollywood's evolution, banter about his love of flying planes. But within 10 minutes, the tone shifted. Behar, always known for pushing buttons, pivoted to a more controversial topic, one Ford hadn't come prepared to discuss. "So Harrison," she began, leaning in, "you've played heroes who stand for truth and justice. I gotta ask, in real life, where do you stand on some of the issues we're facing today? I mean, you're not shy about calling out climate change, but you've stayed pretty quiet on other things." Ford's eyebrows lifted. "Other things?" Joy smirked. "Well, the strikes, the politics, the," she paused for emphasis, "chaos. Don't you think it's time icons like you took a louder stand?" It was subtle, but everyone on set felt the air shift. Ford leaned back, arms crossed. "I'm not here to talk politics, Joy," he said, voice calm but firm. "I came to talk about the film." "Oh, come on," she pressed. "Don't dodge. You know the game. You've been in this business longer than I've been alive." That wasn't true, and the dig didn't go unnoticed. The studio audience chuckled nervously. Sonny Hostin blinked. Whoopi Goldberg shot Joy a warning glance. But Joy was on a roll. "It just seems like, with your platform, you could say a lot more. Especially about—" "Don't tell me what I should say," Ford interrupted, his voice low but unmistakably sharp. The tension was immediate. The audience quieted. Cameras zoomed in slightly, not intentionally, but because the energy had shifted so dramatically, the director instinctively tightened the frame. Behar didn't back down. "I'm just saying." "No," Ford said, voice rising. "You're demanding. There's a difference. I've been doing this for 50 years. I don't need to sit here and be told what I should be doing with my platform. This isn't activism hour. It's a talk show." A gasp echoed from the front row, and Joy, sensing the crowd's unease, smiled, but it was forced. "I'm just asking the questions our viewers are thinking," she said. Ford stood up. It was sudden, unscripted, and very, very real. "I think I've said enough," he muttered. Wait, Harrison, don't," Whoopi interjected, trying to smooth things over. But he was already walking, past the co-hosts, past the shocked producers, past the cameras. No handlers, no goodbye, just a legend leaving a set that suddenly felt far too small for him. The live audience didn't know what to do. There was no applause cue. The crew scrambled. Behar sat in stunned silence for a full 2 seconds before trying to laugh it off. "Well, that escalated quickly," she said. But the damage was done. Backstage, chaos. One assistant producer allegedly burst into tears. The show's PR rep was already drafting emergency statements. Ford's team was unreachable for the next 48 hours. ABC execs demanded answers, and more importantly, a strategy. Because the clip by then had already gone viral. Every angle of Ford's walk-off was slowed down, captioned, and analyzed. TikTok lit up. YouTube channels with names like Talk Show Meltdowns and Celebs Gone Rogue had the footage uploaded and monetized within the hour. And the comments? A war zone. Some praised Ford, called him a legend for putting Behar in her place. Others accused him of being fragile, outdated, unable to handle a tough question. Twitter became a battlefield of hot takes and think pieces. Headlines read, Hollywood icon walks out on The View. Joy Behar pushes too far? Is this the end of Harrison Ford's media appearances? Meanwhile, Joy Behar remained unapologetic. I did what I always do, she said on the next day's episode. We ask questions. If people don't want to answer them, that's on them. Her tone was defiant, but her eyes told a different story, tired, maybe even shaken. She'd gone viral before, but never quite like this. Ford, for his part, went silent. Again. No tweets, no publicist statements, no interviews. He pulled out of 2 scheduled appearances that week. And according to one insider, he canceled a segment with Jimmy Fallon at the last minute, citing emotional exhaustion. But Hollywood doesn't forget easily, and talk shows, they live and die by moments like these. Rumors started circulating about a possible apology, a secret phone call between Behar and Ford, an offer to return to The View for a peaceful follow-up. None of it confirmed. The public, hungry for closure, got none. Instead, a new narrative was forming, one that neither party could control. To some, this was a generational clash, a symbol of old-school Hollywood stoicism colliding with modern media's demand for constant accountability. To others, it was just ego, 2 strong personalities unwilling to yield. But to those in the room that day, it was something else. It was real. No scripts, no pre-interview rehearsals, no teleprompters. Just 2 people, live, unscripted, and completely incompatible in that moment. And that, perhaps, is why it exploded. Some moments are so electric, so raw, that they don't just live on the screen, they echo. If you thought the fireworks ended when Harrison Ford walked off The View, buckle up. The real story unfolds in the days that followed, backstage whispers, crisis meetings, emotional breakdowns, and decisions that would shape reputations for years. And before we unravel this unbelievable second chapter, you know the drill. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop your take in the comments, because things are about to get even messier. Backstage was frozen for a full 5 seconds after Harrison Ford exited. Cameras were still rolling. The audience was still seated, half confused, half waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. Joy Behar stared across the stage with a face that tried to mask it all, surprise, defiance, and maybe even regret. But it was Whoopi Goldberg who moved first, taking control like a veteran pilot in sudden turbulence. We're gonna take a break, she said calmly, gesturing toward the crew. Producers rushed onto the set, murmuring into headsets, some already dialing PR teams. Ford hadn't said a word on his way out, not to the showrunner, not to his publicist who had waited in the green room, not even to the CBS rep who tried to intercept him near the exit. Joy stayed seated, silent now, hands folded on the table. The studio lights dimmed slightly, and her smile, the one she wore so often it seemed part of her identity, had vanished. She didn't look at anyone, not even Sunny Hostin, who sat beside her, clearly uncomfortable. Everyone could feel it. Something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford's team had already sprung into motion. His longtime manager, Dennis Park, sent a blunt two-word text to the CBS liaison: "We're done." Within 30 minutes, Ford's entire afternoon press slate had been canceled. Radio silence followed. The kind of silence that wasn't just tactical, it was personal. Inside the CBS offices, damage control went into overdrive. The executive producer of The View, Carla Weiss, called an emergency post-mortem. "This can't become a PR disaster," she said, pacing the control room. "We need to frame it before the internet does." But it was already too late. Clips of the moment were circulating on Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok, complete with dramatic music and fast captions. One trending video had already reached 1 million views within the hour. It was titled, "Joy Behar just made Harrison Ford quit mid-interview, yikes." Social media was a war zone. One side cheered Ford's response, calling it refreshing, bold, necessary. Others slammed him as thin-skinned, dismissive, even condescending. Joy Behar, too, became a lightning rod. Some said she had finally crossed the line. Others praised her for asking the hard questions. Inside ABC, legal was reviewing the footage. Not because anything illegal had happened, but because the potential fallout was enormous. Advertisers were watching. Sponsors were nervous. Harrison Ford wasn't just a guest, he was an icon. And icons walking off live television wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous. Behind the scenes, the cast of The View didn't know what to do with themselves. Whoopi Goldberg, who'd always acted as the anchor of the group, seemed distracted. Sunny Hostin avoided everyone, glued to her phone. Sarah Haynes was reportedly overheard saying, "This is gonna follow us for months." And Joy? She disappeared into her dressing room and didn't come out for 2 hours. Inside, she sat alone. No makeup crew, no assistants, no coffee runner. She stared at herself in the mirror and whispered under her breath, "What the hell just happened?" It wasn't the first time she'd gotten under someone's skin. In fact, it was part of her brand, but this felt different. It wasn't just a tense moment, it was an implosion. Ford wasn't a pop star or a reality TV villain. He was Harrison Ford. And he had walked off her stage like it was beneath him. At 6 p.m., she finally responded to a text from Carla Weiss, agreeing to appear on the next day's episode and address the situation live. Meanwhile, Ford was already on a private flight back to Wyoming. He wasn't scheduled to be there for another week, but he had called the jet hours earlier. According to a flight assistant, he didn't speak the entire way, except once, when asked if he'd like a drink. "Just water," he said, and no talking. Back on the ground, news outlets scrambled. Some spun the story as a Hollywood tantrum. Others painted Joy as an aggressor. Every entertainment show, podcast, and digital outlet ran with it. TMZ claimed a source close to Harrison said he felt ambushed. Page 6 ran with the headline, "The Daytime Diva versus the Screen Legend." The next morning's episode of The View opened in silence. No music, no applause. Just the 5 co-hosts at the table and the weight of the previous day pressing heavily on everyone's shoulders. Joy Behar cleared her throat. "Before we begin today, I want to address something that happened yesterday." The audience was still. "We had Harrison Ford on this show, and things got heated. I asked a question. He didn't like it. He walked off. That's not how we hoped it would go." She paused. "I've been doing this a long time. I ask what I think the audience wants to know. Sometimes that lands well. Sometimes it doesn't, but I don't regret asking." The crowd was unsure whether to applaud, and many didn't. Joy wasn't looking for approval anyway. She seemed tired, not defeated, but weathered. Ford's team, meanwhile, issued a short statement through a spokesperson. "Mr. Ford has the utmost respect for journalistic integrity. However, yesterday's experience on The View was not in line with the professional standards he expects during promotional appearances. He will not be commenting further." It was the closest thing to a ceasefire. And yet the storm hadn't passed. Because just as the media frenzy began to slow down, another ripple surfaced. Harrison Ford had been recorded without his knowledge, speaking to someone backstage moments before the walk-off. The clip was grainy. The audio wasn't perfect. But one thing was clear. Ford had said, "If she pushes this, I'm out. I don't owe her a damn thing." It exploded online. Now, the walk-off wasn't just about the question. It was premeditated. At least, that's how people framed it. More accusations followed. Think pieces appeared overnight. Was Harrison Ford planning to storm off all along? Talk show takedown, performative rage, or genuine offense? Joy's defenders pushed back, saying the backstage clip only proved Ford came in already defensive. Others argued it showed he had been baited, that he knew what was coming and tried to avoid it. At the center of it all, two people who, just days earlier, had no real reason to ever collide. Two people from different worlds, and now they were locked in a narrative battle neither wanted and neither could control. There are moments that blow up on television, but what happens after the cameras stop rolling? That's where the real drama lives. The lights dimmed on the View. Harrison Ford vanished from the studio, and Joy Behar delivered her public statement, but the fallout was far from over. If you thought the dust had settled, think again. Because in this chapter, what started as a live TV flashpoint morphs into an industry-wide crisis. So hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and brace yourself, because what you're about to hear wasn't meant to be public. 3 days after the walk-off, the entertainment world had gone from curious to obsessed. Agents were whispering. Studio heads were texting each other in all caps. Even veteran talk show hosts were holding emergency staff meetings to make sure a Ford-style exit wouldn't happen on their watch. But in the middle of this frenzy, a piece of audio surfaced, one that turned speculation into scandal. It was a voicemail. Short, unintended for public release, but damning. Someone, no one knew who, had leaked a recorded message left by Joy Behar to a senior producer at The View. The tone was tired, edges frayed, but it wasn't what she said that made waves. It was how she said it. "I don't care who he is," Joy's voice crackled. "He walked into our house and acted like we owed him silence. That man's been famous longer than I've been a redhead. He should know better. And if he wants to play the in too big for this game, he can stay off every damn stage from here on out." Within hours, the leak went viral. Joy's supporters called it honest. Ford's fans called it arrogant. And everyone else? They just couldn't believe it had come to this. Two entertainment legends now embroiled in a battle of egos and ideals, dragged into the spotlight by a 30-second voicemail. Ford, at the time, was still at his ranch in Wyoming. He hadn't left since the walk-off. His team, close-knit and notoriously private, kept journalists at bay. But insiders said the voicemail changed something in him. He didn't yell, one source explained. He just got quiet. Real quiet. Then he called his lawyer. Meanwhile, The View was in chaos. The show's next 3 tapings were plagued by tension. Segments were restructured. Pre-interviews became rehearsals. Staffers were warned to assume that anything said backstage could end up online. The trust was gone, not just between hosts and guests, but between the hosts themselves. Sarah Haynes reportedly told a friend, "We used to be a team. Now it feels like everyone's defending themselves." Sunny Hostin, who had largely stayed quiet on the issue, was visibly withdrawn on set. Even Whoopi, normally the show's anchor, had started showing signs of fatigue, taking longer breaks between segments and skipping some meetings altogether. But Joy? She was doubling down. "I've been in this business for 40 years, she said during a behind-the-scenes conversation caught on a hot mic. "I've seen tantrums, I've seen storm-offs. This one just happened to be from Indiana Jones, so everyone's losing their minds." The producers, however, weren't laughing. Behind closed doors, executives were weighing options. not cancellation. The View was still a ratings juggernaut, but damage control. Could Joy be asked to issue an apology? Should Ford be invited back? Could there be a televised reconciliation? Lawyers said no. Ford's team had made it clear there would be no return appearance, no joint statement, no forgiveness tour. He's not interested in healing the narrative, one publicist said. He just wants it to end. And yet, it wouldn't. Because soon after the voicemail leak, another headline broke, this time from an entirely different direction. A former talk show booker, speaking anonymously, told The Hollywood Reporter that Ford's team had expressed concerns about Joy Behar's interview style weeks before the scheduled appearance. They flagged it early, the source revealed. They said, no politics, no off-topic questions, or we pull. The producers said they'd keep it light. But that promise wasn't kept. Now the narrative flipped again. Was Ford provoked? Was Joy warned? Had this entire thing been a time bomb waiting to go off? The public didn't know who to believe, but Hollywood insiders were picking sides. Some called Ford's reaction old school, a product of a bygone era of celebrity entitlement. Others said he was a pro, and that Joy had betrayed the implicit trust between host and guest. But while the world argued, something else happened, something no one expected. Harrison Ford broke his silence. In a pre-taped appearance for a conservation fundraiser, Ford took the stage, his first public appearance since the walk-off. He didn't mention The View by name, but toward the end of his speech, he went off script. Sometimes, he said, staring past the teleprompter, people expect you to play along with the drama, to be part of the theater of outrage. But I didn't become an actor to argue on television. I did it to tell stories, not to become one. The audience was stunned. The clip went viral. It was quiet, controlled, devastating. Joy Behar, watching from her Manhattan apartment, didn't respond publicly. But according to someone close to the production, she said aloud to no one in particular, that was a shot. I felt it. The war wasn't over. It had just gone cold. A quiet chill settled over the story. The headlines slowed. The tweets faded. But the tension? Still there. Harrison Ford resumed his press tour, carefully avoiding live studio appearances. Joy returned to her chair on The View, but the edge hadn't dulled. She was sharper now, less patient, as if trying to prove she hadn't been shaken. And then came the whisper of a new development. A producer at Netflix leaked that Ford had turned down a major documentary appearance. The topic? His career, his legacy, his philosophy on fame. The reason? Too many questions. The message was clear. Ford wasn't playing anymore. Not every story gets a clean ending. Some burn slow and fade without warning. Others leave scars that never really heal. And then there are the ones that circle back when you least expect them, the ones that haunt late-night writers' rooms and reappear in awkward silence during morning meetings. The Harrison Ford-Joy Behar clash wasn't just a media storm. It was a fault line, one that would ripple through the industry long after the audience clapped, the cameras shut off, and the headlines stopped screaming. So if you're still here, still watching, still listening, hit that subscribe button and strap in. Because the final chapter is not about resolution. It's about what's left behind. Months passed. Seasons changed. The clips stopped trending. But within certain corners of the entertainment world, the aftershocks never stopped. Harrison Ford, now 82, had continued working, but differently. The roles he took were quieter. He canceled all daytime press, instead opting for polished, controlled appearances with trusted outlets. His once routine late-night charm offensive? Gone. He used to walk into these rooms and own them, one former publicist said. Now, it's like he's guarding the perimeter before he even says hello. When his next film, a quiet indie drama about grief and aging, premiered in New York, the press asked no questions about The View. None were allowed, but everyone felt the shadow of it lingering in the room. He posed for photos. He smiled politely, but the spark, the effortless gravitas he once carried like a leather jacket, felt dulled, maybe permanently. Meanwhile, Joy Behar remained on The View, but something had changed there too. The show moved on publicly, sure. Hot topics returned. Guests laughed. Politics raged. But in quiet moments, commercial breaks, off-camera whispers, the tension never fully dissolved. Joy had become sharper in tone, quicker to cut off co-hosts, less tolerant of disagreement. Her monologues grew more pointed, more defensive, sometimes even accusatory. She used to play the long game, one longtime staffer said. Now she seems like she's always waiting for someone to cross her. And behind the scenes, whispers persisted. Rumors of replacement discussions, notes from Disney higher-ups, conversations about image rehab. But Joy wasn't backing down. She'd built her career on fearlessness. Backing down wasn't in her DNA. "I'm not going to apologize for asking questions," she told an executive producer one morning in a conversation that reportedly ended with her slamming the door behind her. Then came the surprise twist, a private meeting request. Not from Behar, from Ford. According to two sources, he had his assistant reach out quietly to The View's production office in late fall. Not for a return, not for an on-air apology, but for a face-to-face. No press, no cameras, no statements. The message read, just clarity. For weeks, there was silence. Then one November afternoon, a black SUV was seen pulling into the underground lot at the ABC studios. Security cleared the area. Two producers were present. Joy Behar arrived 10 minutes later. What exactly was said in that room remains sealed. No transcripts, no recordings, no leaks, a rarity in this age. But what followed was telling. That night, The View's social media posted a cryptic message. Sometimes it's the off-camera conversations that matter most. No names, no photos, just that. And Harrison Ford. He went quiet again until a December interview with Esquire, where the journalist cautiously asked, "Would you ever consider returning to daytime television?" Ford paused, smirked. "Only if the coffee's better." It was the closest thing to a wink he'd offered since the incident. But for all the behind-the-scenes diplomacy, the public hadn't forgotten. Social media had archived the moment. TikTok edits were still being made. Twitter threads resurfaced like clockwork. The incident had transcended gossip. It had become digital folklore, a culture clash, a cautionary tale. And yet, something else began to emerge, a strange, unlikely respect. A YouTube essayist dropped a video titled, "Why Harrison Ford vs. Joy Behar Was the Last Real Talk Show Moment." It went viral. Over 8 million views in the first week. In it, the creator argued that the moment, while messy, was authentic. No handlers, no filters, just two people, unfiltered, saying what they really felt. Comments poured in. Ford said what a lot of celebs think, but never admit. Joy was asking questions the audience did want answers to. This felt real. Finally, critics softened. What once was scandal now felt like substance. And slowly, what had seemed like a career-damaging clash began to shift into something else entirely, a kind of cultural artifact. Books mentioned it, podcasts dissected it, comedy shows spoofed it. Even college media classes began including it in curriculum discussions on ethics in broadcasting. By the time the anniversary of the walk-off approached, the narrative had evolved. It was no longer the day Harrison Ford stormed off The View. It had become the day television cracked open and showed us what it really was. And that morning, without fanfare, The View opened its show with no audience. No applause, just the hosts, a single camera shot. Joy Behar, dressed in a muted navy blouse, looked directly into the lens. 1 year ago today, she began, we had a moment on this stage that surprised everyone, including us. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. But it was real. And sometimes, real is messy. Sometimes, it's uncomfortable. But it matters. And so do the conversations that follow. No one interrupted. No jokes. Just silence. Then she smiled faintly. And for what it's worth, Harrison, if you're watching, the coffee's still terrible. The studio cut to commercial, but the internet exploded. The comments came flooding in, funny, nostalgic, even heartfelt. Full circle moment. Who would have thought this story would have a soul? They're both legends, period. And just like that, the narrative that had once threatened careers, reputations, and networks had transformed. It was no longer about blame. It had become about balance. About how two icons collided in public, shattered the illusion of polite TV, and walked away, bruised but still standing. Harrison Ford, the gruff, principled legend who refused to play along. Joy Behar, the unflinching voice who dared to press harder. They never reconciled on air. But maybe they didn't have to. Because in the end, some clashes don't need closure. They just need to be understood. And sometimes, the most unforgettable moments on television are the ones nobody saw coming.